ó ṣe pàtàkì púpọ̀ kì í ṣe Yorùbá wa nìkan ni mo fẹ́ sọ sí nǹkan tó yẹ kí n sọ kí gbogbo ayé gbọ́ ni àti débi tá à ń lọ káàdà wa máa sòótọ́ tó máa gbé wa jáde kúrò nínú àjàgà Nàìjíríà lókù torí náà ẹ fún mi láyè ẹ ní bínú sí mi tí n bá sọ nǹkan tí mo fẹ́ sọ lénìí ní èdè English tí àwọn púpọ̀ káàkiri ayé máa lè gbọ́ mo fẹ́ particularly àwọn tó ń ṣèjọba ayé kan lè gbọ́ nǹkan tí mo sọ ó má di pé wọ́n ṣe wá sọ pé kí ló ń sọ wọ́n máa translate fún wọn torí náà ẹ jọ̀ọ́ ẹ dáríjì mi. What I have to say today is very important. It is so important that I will not be rendering it in the Yoruba language because it is a message not only for the Yoruba people but for the entire world, for the international community. I want significant entities in the international community to hear me clearly because we Yoruba, we have reached the point now, we have reached what we regard as the door to our goal. And we need to let the world know what we are doing and why we are doing it. We were included in what is now called Nigeria in 1914 through an amalgamation, which the British organized by themselves alone, without any input or signature from any Yoruba person or authority. Our traditional rulers existed, but they were not invited to be part of it. There were highly educated Yoruba people in our country. We have been producing university graduates as far as the late 1850s, but none of the leading citizens of our land was invited to be a signatory to the amalgamation decree of 1914, of January 1, 1914. We were treated like a conquered people, even though we were not a conquered people. And we were included in a country whose purposes we did not know. Nigeria was created in 1914 for the purpose of benefiting British colonial interests in Nigeria. The British were saddled with, found themselves as rulers of two protectorates, one in southern Nigeria, one in northern Nigeria. The one in northern Nigeria could not produce the income, the revenues to pay the salary of the British officials working in the northern protectorate. And so it became necessary for the northern protectorate to appeal to the British government annually for subsidies to enable them to pay their salaries. And finally, in 1914 January, in 1913 September or November, the British government decided in London that Nigeria be amalgamated. And on January 1, 1914, Nigeria was amalgamated. The two protectorates were amalgamated to make Nigeria. That meant, essentially, no more than that the resources of the South was being used to finance the protectorate of the North. In the next many years, in the next 30 years, nothing happened. The two protectorates just went on their own. The only thing was that the resources of the South were taken from time to time to finance the North. Then came the Second World War. And at the end of the Second World War, the world, led by the United States of America, came to the conclusion that colonized peoples should be liberated worldwide. And so the picture arose of a Nigeria that will become an independent country of Nigeria. And under the arrangements for that event, constitutions were created. The constitution that was finally put together in 1949 to 51 divided Nigeria into into a federation, and the North was made a region. The protectorates in the South, the Southern Protectorate was divided into two: an Eastern region and a Western region. And from that moment, because the objective was coming independence, from that moment, the British began to manipulate to ensure that the Northerners would rule the country. And what was the qualification of the Northerners? Especially the small group that ruled the North, the Fulani. What was their qualification? One, they were believed not to be African. They were not of African origin. They were a Middle Eastern people who had been migrating westwards to North Africa and to West Africa. And because they were not indigenous to the land, the British regarded them as easy to handle and manipulate. Then they have further education, and they had no intention at all. They showed no intention at all to accept Western education. And so the British thought, wow, these people, for us to be able to exploit Nigeria after independence, these are the people we must hand power over to. So the British, from 1951 to 1960, manipulated everything that could be manipulated. The sizes of the regions, the borders of the regions, the constitution, the election, ultimately, the election of 1959, the pre-independence election, was very meticulously rigged in order to hand over power to the Fulani of northern Nigeria over Nigeria. And we're not saying anything that is new here. Even the man who was chairman of the group, of the British colonial group that masterminded the secret operation that produced the rigging for the North, has written in his memoir, and he has appeared on television a number of times before his death. So at independence, therefore, the Fulani of northern Nigeria, living on the population size of the Hausa, became the rulers of Nigeria. And the Hausa themselves, who was, they used to talk of Hausa Fulani. The Hausa were very viciously suppressed. So that Hausa Fulani meant essentially simply Fulani. And the Fulani regarded their duty as not to develop Nigeria, not to develop a country. They didn't know what to do to develop a country. They didn't have the education, or the inclination for education, or the inclination for modern skills. So they decided that the thing to do was to suppress the other peoples of Nigeria. And so they immediately took advantage, took hold of their Islamic faith, of their strong Islamic faith, as an instrument for subduing the rest of Nigeria. That's what they had used to suppress the Hausa people. So they decided to use it now to suppress the rest of Nigeria. Meanwhile, Christianity had spread in the middle belt of the north and in the south, southeast and southwest, the homeland of predominantly the Yoruba and the Igbo people. But the Fulani were determined to make that kind of fundamentalist and jihadist Islam roll over the whole of Nigeria. Their spokespersons constantly talked of they are going to conquer until they have dipped the Quran in the sea, on the coast, on the Atlantic coast of Nigeria. 11 days after the independence, after the celebration of independence, their leader, Sir Madu Bello, the Sardauna of Sokoto, said to a newspaper, to a local newspaper, this new country called Nigeria shall be an extension, listen carefully, shall be an extension of the estate of our great-grandfather Osman Danfodio. We must use the peoples of the Middle Belt, that is the Middle Belt part of the North, as willing tools, and the highly educated peoples of the South, the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Ijaw, and so on, as conquered territory, and never let them rule over us, and never let them control their own future. Nigeria was to become an extension of the estate of Osman Danfodio. What was the estate of Osman Danfodio? Conquest by Islam, by fundamentalist jihadist Islam, period. So the whole of Nigeria was to be rolled over by Islam. And that is the agenda that they have been pursuing since then. As soon as Nigeria became independent, the northern rulers of Nigeria decided that the first enemy to be handled, the first enemy to be subdued, were the Yoruba of the Southwest, who are the most educated people in Nigeria, the largest single ethnic group, the people who had produced Africa's first program of free education, and so on. But they were in danger. They were an enemy from two perspectives. The first is that they were a people, they are still a people, who have a tradition of religious tolerance, which has created a situation in which there were millions of Christians and millions of Muslims and millions of traditional worshippers among the Yoruba people. An American team that studied Nigeria, that did some research on Nigeria for an agency of the American government, wrote in 2003, the Yoruba are a model of modern coexistence and tolerance, because we found Yoruba Christians, Muslims, and traditional worshippers living harmoniously and happily, not only in the same towns, but in the same households. That's who the Yoruba people were. But that kind of culture was a danger to the Islamic agenda of the Fulani.
Mommy's calling you.
Because it meant that the Fulani, that the Muslims among the Yoruba could never become jihadists or fundamentalists or terrorists. No way. There is hardly any Yoruba family that does not have some Muslims, some Christians, some traditional worshippers. And so to get a Yoruba man to agree to wage war, the war of Islam, a jihad against his own people, is impossible. And so the Northerners regarded the Yoruba people, Muslims and all, as a danger to the Islamizing program. And moreover, among the Yoruba, the largest and most powerful denominations of Christian denominations and groups were emerging among the Yoruba. And so that added to the feeling that the Yoruba were a special danger to the program of Islamization. The Gotu in the East are almost all Roman Catholics. Muslims were few among them. And so they too were a danger to the Islamic agenda. And the Islamic agenda actually meant that the Fulani will control all of Nigeria, not just the federal government, but all of Nigeria. And so the first group to be subdued were the Yoruba. In 1962, by deceiving and manipulating with the help of the British, the Fulani succeeded in dividing the Yoruba leadership and causing a crisis in the Western region. And even though there were no riots or disturbances in the Western region, the federal government under the Fulani then declared a state of emergency in the Western region with the objective of pulling down the Western region. They suspended the constitution of the Western region, suspended the elected government of the Western region, imposed a sole administrator on the Western region, and proceeded systematically to pull down the achievements of the Western region. And also to rig election in the Western region in order to put in charge of the Western region persons who are inclined to be submissive to the Fulani. So my brothers, educated people like me, and businessmen, and the Yoruba elite in general, you are getting this, who are getting this message wrong, who are not getting this picture correctly, to begin to educate themselves and get it correctly. This is a forever kind of war against the Yoruba people. It will never stop. And the Fulani themselves say it anyway. We are ready to fight this war forever. We are ready to fight it for decades, for centuries, until we win, until we dip the Quran in the sea, until we turn every one of these people into jihadist, fundamentalist Islamists. The same thing with the Igbo. The same thing with the Igbo in the south. And the Edo, the highly civilized kingdom of the Edo people. And the hundreds of smaller nationalities in the Middle Belt. Even under the first government of the Republic, after independence, it was quite common for the premier to lead jihadist sorties into the Middle Belt in order to subdue the Middle Belt and make the Middle Belt the willing tools of the North, of the Fulani. And so here we are, and then the manipulations and the distortions in the Southwest led to ultimately a Yoruba revolt in 1965 to January 1966, because the revolt was shaking the foundations of the country. A group of young Yoruba and Igbo soldiers, officers in the army, decided to take over the government. And the North reacted with a program for eliminating southern citizens living in the North, most of them Igbo. And within weeks, killed more than 40,000. More than 40,000 Igbo people in the streets of the towns of the North. The Igbo fled, most of the Igbo then fled to their own region in the southeast. And when they could not get any assurance that they would be safe in Nigeria, they decided to secede from Nigeria. And so the federal government declared war on the Igbo, on what was then called Biafra. The Igbo had said that their new country would be called Biafra. And in that civil war, more than 2 million Igbo people died. The war lasted for 30 months. When it was over, what had happened is that the hold of the northern Fulani had become stronger on the country. And so a series of military coups organized by Fulani officers ruled Nigeria from 1966 July until 1999 with a brief period of civilian 23. And what did these military rulers actually try to do? We all say usually that the centralized government in Nigeria. No, that's not all the Fulani. In the homeland of the Yoruba, they took over everything of importance. They took over the university that the Yoruba people had created. They took over the roads. They took over development projects. They took over, for instance, the great asset of the Yoruba people, the cocoa marketing board. The cocoa marketing board, it became Nigeria Cocoa Marketing Board. And they appointed a northerner as chairman of the cocoa marketing board, a chairman who had never seen a cocoa tree in all his life. Then they took some of the estates that the Yoruba people had established in Ikeja and Papa and so on, and handed it over to individuals, some of them northerners. That's what happened. And they destroyed the rest of the economy of the Yoruba. The large plantation of palm trees in Okitipupa were allowed to be abandoned, well, more or less, because the federal government, under these military rulers, believed that they should not allow the Yoruba to return to the position of high development that they had achieved before independence. So everything was abandoned. Everything was taken over and abandoned. The palm tree, the huge palm tree plantation in Okitipupa, perhaps the largest palm tree plantation on earth in the world, was abandoned. The factory that produced oil from it was also abandoned. The large rubber plantation to the west of Okitipupa was also abandoned. The second largest rubber plantation in Africa, and so too was the citrus plantation in Ijebu. So the Western region's economy was systematically dragged down. The Western Nigeria Development Corporation, which had been the largest single agglomeration of investment capital in Africa, was gradually pulled down. And the result is that the products of the free education in the Yoruba West became unemployed masses of educated young people. And large numbers of them began to flee abroad. The same kind of disasters were also befalling the Igbo and other peoples of the East. And many of them also began to flee abroad. That's where countries like the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom have received large influxes of immigrant educated men from Nigeria. mostly of Yoruba descent, and to a smaller extent of Igbo descent. Having succeeded that far, the Fulani finally decided we have to conquer this country fully. We have succeeded politically. Now we must succeed in actual fact. So from about the last years of the 1990s, they began to hold secret meetings with Fulani leaders from other parts of West Africa. By 2011, they had come to the conclusion that they could conquer Nigeria. And what they were going to use were the Mujahideen. Mujahideen means masses of illiterate paupers, trained and armed and turned into soldiers, militias, militarized poor, the Mujahideen. And it is they who have been ravaging Nigeria since 2015. When our brothers began to work with Buhari's party in 2013 and so on, they were doing what appeared to them to be a good thing, trying to save Nigeria. But they did not know that they were empowering the Islamic Fulani in a new manner over Nigeria. And under Buhari, it quickly became clear that he was there to see to it that the Fulani actually conquered and controlled Nigeria. And so large numbers of people began to get killed. Farmers were expelled from their farms or killed on their farms. Their wives were raped, their daughters were raped and killed. In Yoruba land, in the southwest, agriculture essentially died because almost all the farmers fled. But the Western world was supporting the Fulani and propagating the lie that what was happening in Yoruba land and Igbo land and so on was climate change, droughts in the Sahel that was pushing Fulani herdsmen south, causing conflicts with farmers. It's a lie. It was a plan to conquer the southwest and the southeast of Nigeria. We don't have an estimate of the number of Yoruba people that were killed or the Igbo people that were killed under Buhari. And did some research and came to the conclusion that in the 8 years of the Buhari administration, and the Buhari administration was openly, manifestly complicit in the attacks and killings of people, that in those years, 8 years, 2015 to 2023, a total of 29,000 Yoruba people were killed. The attempt was to impose on Yoruba land a radical Islamic agenda. Attempts were made particularly on churches. For instance, in 2023, I think, 2022, the Fulani terrorists burst upon a church, a large Roman Catholic church in the city, the Yoruba city of Owo, and they killed a total of 87 people. They just burst upon the church and began to shoot. Men, women, old women, children were killed. 87 in all. The newspaper said 40 something. No, it was not that. It was a total of 87 people were killed in that church that morning. People who were serving their God. And so, this is what we have been living with. And we have now decided we cannot continue to live with this. Why? Because under Buhari, 1815 to 1823, the government were actually supporting the killings. Yeah. A middle belt official, public retired official, military official, who used to be Minister for Defense, Nigeria's Minister of Defense, came out in 2021 or 2022 to say that the Nigerian army was not protecting the people being attacked, but was giving cover to the people who were attacking. And our experience in the south and the middle belt is that if the Fulani jihadist comes to your farm and and you are able to defend yourself and so on, and a Fulani man is to die there, then you will be arrested and be charged with murder. It is not considered that you were peacefully walking on your farm with your wife and children when the Fulani came. Among the Yoruba, the highest traditional citizens are the Obas. At least 5 Obas have been killed by the Fulani. 5 Obas of the Yoruba people have been killed by Fulani. In one case, the Fulani burst into the palace, all armed, and gathered the Oba together with his wife and children and told them, "We are kidnapping you, we are taking you away." The Oba said, "No, you cannot take me away, it's impossible." And they killed him on the spot and took his wife and children away into captivity in the forest. Yoruba politicians listened to their people. In 2020, I was one of the people who went to the governors of the western region, of the southwest, of the Yoruba southwest. And we told them, we must not allow our young people to go and confront these Fulani barbarians in the bush. Our young people are all products of higher education. Our parents have invested heavily on education for these young people. It will be a tragedy for the Yoruba nation to see them perish in the bush, fighting barbarian, illiterate mujahideen. So our governors agreed with us, graciously agreed together to create an institution that the state will use to protect its people. And they called it Amatekun. The federal government immediately also said Amatekun was an unconstitutional creation and must be disbanded. Well, Amatekun is no longer of any value today in the defense of Yoruba land. And so, we come to the era of a new presidency. I need to add before I go on to this new presidency, that in order to make sure that not only is agriculture destroyed in the southwest, the Yoruba southwest, but that the Yoruba southwest will not be able to get food from other Yorubas who are living beyond the border in Benin Republic. The government of President Buhari closed the borders. And we all saw on television Yoruba women traders begging at the border to be allowed to carry through their yams and gari and rice and so on. We also saw Nigerian officials, Nigerian military officials, or policemen, or border guards go into marketplaces in the areas close to the border and seize the merchandise being sold by Yoruba women. The idea behind all of this, it was to make sure that the Yoruba will be prostrate on their face. Yeah. Then 2023 came and another president was installed. They tried to stop him, even though he was a major creator of their party. They tried to stop him, but he was too strong for them. And he became president. But his reign, his leadership as president has shown that nobody, that the federal government of Nigeria, under anybody, no matter where you come from, cannot deal with the Fulani. You cannot deal with the Fulani. The Fulani are still killing and maiming and destroying as they said they would do. There is a statistic that has come out in this last December that in the first 12 months of the Tinubu presidency, from May 2023 to April 2024, a total of 614,000 Nigerians were killed by the terrorists. 614,500 and something. And out of this 614,000, nearly 16,000, that is 15,962 Yoruba people were killed. The presidency of Buhari had been complicit, had been actually helping the Fulani. The presidency of Tinubu is not helping the Fulani, but they are not able to do anything against the Fulani, to stop the Fulani. They are not. And so we have come to the painful conclusion that it doesn't matter if our brother is president of Nigeria, the institutions of Nigeria, the direction of Nigeria is so well structured that even a Yoruba president of Nigeria cannot defend the Yoruba part of Nigeria. An Igbo president of Nigeria cannot defend the Igbo part of Nigeria. It's as simple as that. And so we have decided this is the point at which we must take our leave of Nigeria. We must take our leave. When President Tinubu arose as president of Nigeria, we wrote him a letter, just as we had written a letter to Buhari before. And our main point in the letter was, we are a peaceful, civilized people. We don't want to continue under this barbarism anymore. We want you, Mr. President, to set up a process whereby we can negotiate with the authorities of Nigeria our peaceful departure from Nigeria, our peaceful separation from Nigeria. Buhari did not answer. We wrote exactly the same letter for demanding the same things to President Tinubu, our brother, and he has not answered us. So we are left with no option than to find other means of taking our leave out of Nigeria. And so we're telling the whole world that Nigeria is a country where civilized Christian people cannot live. You cannot live here. No. Christian people cannot live. Here is a country in which our young men would defend their fathers on the farm and defend their mothers on the farm against a Fulani, and one Fulani may die and so on. And the police will come and arrest our boys. And when the Fulani people come and kill 20, 30, 40, 100 people in a village or in some villages, nobody goes after them. If a Yoruba group, a Yoruba village or an Igbo village is successful in actually holding Fulani invader attacking their village, they are able to overpower and hold them, not kill them. The police will come and take the Fulani away. And then the next thing you will hear is that they have been ordered by the higher authorities in Abuja to transfer the case from where the offense was committed to Abuja. And that's the last we are going to hear about the case. The Fulani will not suffer. A young woman was traveling on the road in Yoruba land, in the southwest, the daughter of one of our highest citizens in Yoruba land. The Fulani came out of the bush and shot her in her car and killed her. And so we all mourned and wept and so on. But about a month later, the local farmers identified the Fulani who had killed the girl